All right, the February 23rd, 2026 meeting of the Environment and Public Works Committee will now come to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman. Ms. Delvecchio Hoffman is present. Dr. Jeffrey.
Present.
Dr. Jeffrey is present. Mr. Mafucci. Mr. Mafucci is present. Ms. McIntyre. Ms. McIntyre is present. Mr. Morris. Mr. Morris is present. Mr. Sinclair. Mr. Sinclair is present. Chairwoman Hugh Smith.
Here.
Chairwoman Hugh Smith is present.
Thank you. So we'll begin with a brief moment of reflection, and it comes to us this week from the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, an independent nonprofit. They've been analyzing China's emissions, and so in good news, China is showing a flat or falling trend in carbon dioxide emissions that started in 2024. China's emissions dropped despite a 5% growth in their economy. They installed more solar capacity in 1 year than the US has ever built. Thank you. Is there anyone signed up for the public forum?
No, there's not.
Is there anyone present who's not signed up who would like to speak? Seeing nobody. The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. You have the January 27th, 2026 minutes on the Environment and Public Works Committee before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. The next thing on our agenda is a presentation. I'd like to invite Dr. Christy Tyler from the Rochester Institute of Technology and Dr. Katrina Korfmacher from the University of Rochester, the Lake Ontario Microplastics Center, integrating environment and environmental health, to give us a presentation.
Oh, thanks so much. And thanks for inviting us to be here. We're excited to share what we're working on in terms of research on microplastics and health, but we thought that you might have interest in it for a variety of reasons. First of all, lots of people have heard about microplastics and they're worried about them. So it's good to be able to answer questions. Second, there is really cutting edge research going on here in our community that is leading the nation and should be proud of and know something about. Third is that it has significance for local private companies and technology development that are developing methodologies and doing this work locally. And third, it has implications for our communities, educating them, helping them understand about what this problem looks like here and what to do about it. So again, I'm Katrina Korfmacher. I'm from the University of Rochester. We handle the health side of things. And this is Dr. Christy Tyler from Rochester Institute of Technology. They work more on the environmental science side of things. So we're going to start by telling you a little bit about that from our various perspectives, and then hopefully leave some time for questions for you.
Just one moment. We're having a few technical difficulties here.
Can you run it from that or? Okay. We also have a PDF version if that's easier to use. I don't mind talking about microplastics without pictures, but it's much nicer when you have pictures. Because they're very best. So I just did the introduction to microplastics, and I'm going to hand off to Christy to talk about the environmental side of things, and then we'll switch over to talking about research that's going on here.
So you may be able to just, if you like squish the slide part of it, and then, so we can't see the notes. I don't think you'll need to read the notes that are underneath. Yeah,
Oh, that's
perfect.
better.
Okay, that's great.
Sure.
Okay, so this is our agenda that we put together. So the next slide is just the idea that plastic's everywhere. It's been found in the Arctic, where there's no people. It's been found at the bottom of the world's deepest trench. I have a colleague I was talking to at a meeting last fall, and he had just finished a 3,000-meter survey on the ocean floor. And while they were doing their survey, they saw by the camera, they saw a bag float by. So it's everywhere on Earth.
Can you speak to?
Oh, sure.
please?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Next slide. Okay, but as far as what plastic is, it's not a single thing. And that's one of the problems with plastic and what makes it so complex, is that plastic is actually a huge number of different kinds of polymers. It has a number of additives that are put in it to give it its function. And then it's made into different shapes and sizes and forms, often given dyes to give certain colors. And then once it's in the environment, it can absorb different kinds of toxins. It can have pathogens on the surface. So it creates really a suite of contaminants that makes it very different from something like DDT or ozone or lead, because it's not a single thing. The other part of it that makes it complicated is that little picture on the bottom was the contents of my purse last year. And if you look at it, or if you look at yourself, a lot of the things on you are plastic, and they're important things. They're your key fob, they're your glasses. And so differentiating between what are the things we need to do something about because they're harming the environment, and there's a lot of them entering the environment or entering our bodies, and those that are critical parts of our way of life, that keep us healthy. For example, masks during COVID is a really difficult thing to do. Next slide. So with the problem of plastics really started after World War II. The plastics was first started being used as part of the war enterprise, and then became more of a commercial enterprise. There's documents from the plastic industry from that time period saying basically that the future of plastic is in the trash can, and that's the advent of disposables. This is Life magazine from 1955 with this idea of throwaway living, and it was going to save particularly women in the house a lot of time to not be washing all of these dishes. And that's really the advent of disposable plastics. So they've been around for a long time. Next slide. And so if we look at plastic production over time, this figure is going from 1950 to about 2015. And on the left side is plastic production globally. And on the right side is the amount of waste that's generated. And so just pointing out a couple of kind of notable pieces of these figures, the one on the left with production For example, the green, that bright green, that is building and construction. So it's used a lot more in in construction over time. But if you look at the bottom part of it, that's the packaging. And packaging is the piece of that industry that has grown the most exponentially over the last several decades. And then when you look at how much waste is generated, that construction component of it is actually quite small. Because the lifetime of construction materials is long, whereas the lifetime of these disposables may be a matter of minutes. You unwrap your candy wrapper and the wrapper is gone. And so it's really those disposable items that are the ones that have the shortest life cycle, but are produced in such massive quantities. And those are the ones that escape into the environment. Next. Okay, so with plastic, a lot of what we think of as plastic and that we can see is macroplastic, so the big stuff, water bottles and packaging. But when we start to get smaller, anything less than 5 millimeters, we call microplastic. And that's really, it's actually a quite large size range when we go from 5 millimeters down to about 100 nanometers, which is very, very tiny. And that's where we get into nanoplastic. So microplastic is a very wide range, but it's really just anything less than 5 millimeters. And again, it's this very big suite of compounds. It can be fibers, it can be little fragments, it can be made that way, or it can be broken off of larger compounds. Next slide. So the sources of plastic entering the environment are multiple. The figure on the left is detailing the amount of plastic that's leaking out into the environment by source, and those are in kilotons. So personal care products, pellets, tire wear particles, synthetic textiles, paint, and then macroplastic. So the big blue bar, that's the macroplastic. So that's the big material that enters the environment and then breaks down into smaller and smaller particles. The way the figure on the right is then showing where we're finding plastic. And again, it's in pretty much every single compartment. It's no longer novel to just say, hey, look, I found some plastic in the environment, because it really is everywhere. Next slide. So this is just a little highlight from some of the work we've been doing at RIT. And this is based on trying to estimate how much plastic is coming from Rochester. And so we've installed these devices called Lititraps in storm drains in the city. And we measure the amount of plastic that's entering the stormwater system. We did this over a 2-year period. And the estimate from that, when you then try to scale it up, is that it's roughly 7,500 kilograms of plastic per year are entering the lake and entering the stormwater system, and about a third of that is going straight to the lake. So that's the plastic that's going in through the separate storm system. But in Rochester, we've got separate stormwater system, and that's what's also in most of the suburbs. In the city, we also have a combined stormwater system, and that's where the sewage combines with the stormwater and goes to the treatment plant, mostly up at Van Laer, except when you have a really big event, and then you get an overflow and everything goes out to the lake. So that estimate of how much is going out to the lake is actually probably an underestimate because it's not taking into account these overflow events. Just as a kind of, what does that mean? It's about 750,000 Poland Spring water bottles if all of that plastic was in that form. So it's a lot of plastics coming just from our city. Next slide. So with the Rochester embayment as the focus area for a lot of the work that we've been doing. I imagine most of you are familiar with the Rochester embayment and the fact that it was just delisted. So in the 1980s, as part of the Great Lakes Agreement with Canada, we had to basically fix the problems. It was delisted last year, but that doesn't mean that the problems are gone. And plastic is something that wasn't even on our radar in the 80s. And so one of the things we've been doing is trying to understand not just how much is coming in, but then how much is persisting in that region. So the next slide is, do we have microplastics in the lake? And of course we do. This is one of my graduate students, and she's been measuring plastic across the Rochester embayment. These are microplastics in the water column in the sediment. These are relatively recent data. That's from this past fall, so fall 2025. And it's lots of different forms. It varies in concentration, but there's a lot of plastic. And these are the same types of concentrations that we find in the oceans. So we're not any different than the ocean. We hear a lot about the ocean, but freshwater systems are equally or more impacted than ocean systems. Next slide. So as far as where the plastic in the lake goes, in the oceans, we hear a lot about garbage patches. Size of Texas, it's floating around in the gyres. In the ocean, it's really kind of this plastic soup with really tiny particles and then huge pieces of floating plastic. So my colleague at RIT, Matt Hoffman, who's an applied mathematician, was interested in trying to figure out, do we have garbage patches in the Great Lakes? And so he's a modeler. And I don't know if that video is going to play because we're not in the mode, so I can tell you what it's going to do. This is Lake Erie. That rather than going out and kind of accumulating in a gyre out in the middle of the lake, most of the plastic is actually coming back to shore. And once it gets there, it either washes up on shore or it sinks to the bottom. So the place that's most impacted by plastic in the Great Lakes is the nearshore area of the lake. And so that's really where our focus has been, is trying to understand, so what does that mean for ecosystem health? And then ultimately, what does it mean for human health? Next slide. So at this point, where we are with research kind of globally is that we know that there are negative impacts. We don't know what the long-term impacts are because we haven't been studying it long enough. And then it also, of course, begs the question about what does that mean for human health? And so I'm going to turn it over to Katrina to kind of talk about the state of knowledge on that.
Next slide, please. So as Christy said, we know that plastics have accumulated throughout the environment, and we also know that they get into our bodies, both through what we eat, what we drink, what we breathe, and even our skin. So next slide, please. And we also know that those plastic particles are small enough to enter all the systems in our body, and they stay in our bodies. So recent studies have found them in all the tissues of the human body, including our brains. Next slide. The thing is that we don't really know much about what happens when the plastics get there. We know that they are in the environment. We know they're in our bodies. We don't know what they're doing to us or how. And that's where our story starts out, is trying to understand how these things are connected in the real world. So there have been a lot of studies that have been taking place on the effects of microplastics on human health. You can see that in 2015, there were almost none. And then now every year, there are hundreds and hundreds of studies that are published. Next slide, please. And however, those studies don't mean that we know now what microplastics do to human health. There are uncertainties at every level of that understanding, how they get into our bodies, how they enter our cells, what they do to our cells, and how they affect the developing body over time. So there's a lot of uncertainty about all of those factors, and people are trying to study them both in a very basic mechanistic way and then trying to look at populations. Can we see what plastics are doing to human health as a population? Next slide, please. One of the really tricky parts about doing this is that the very smallest particles are the ones that are likely to get deepest into the human body. So if you make an analogy to air pollution, it used to be that we think about air pollution in terms of large particles, dark skies. The skies look clean, but that means that there are now small particles that can get deep into our lungs, cross into our blood, go in and affect our brains, our immune systems, all the systems of the body. So what we really care about is these really tiny particles. Of course, they are very difficult to measure. So next slide, please. So there are a lot of methodological challenges that we are dealing with as we try to study these issues. And I want to come back to the very first thing that Christy said about plastics, which is it's not like lead or mercury or DDT. It's not a single chemical. It's a whole suite of things, which means that it's very, very difficult to study plastic as a group, because you need to think about the shape, the size, what's in the plastics and what's on the plastics as they get into the human body. Next slide. So a lot of that research that I mentioned to you before has taken place with very pristine, easy, plastic beads that you could order that are all look the same, and they're not realistic to what we find in the environment. And what we're trying to do by combining the research that has been going on at RIT about what plastics are getting into the environment, how they break down, what they break down into, with the research that's going on at the University of Rochester at what happens when realistic particles like that get into human bodies, affect cells, is what we'd like to tell you about today. Next slide, please.
Okay, so at RIT, we started working on this roughly in about 2015, with some of the ideas starting at how much plastic is entering the lake. And then moving kind of up the watershed to where's it coming from, what happens to it in the environment, and then what the impact is. We formed a collaborative research team of students and staff and faculty, and an environmental educator at RIT. Next slide. I'm not going to go through all the steps of this, but this is kind of have been really lucky to, I think, start this research initiative at a time when there was a lot of federal interest in the problem, and have gotten funding, particularly from NOAA in the past and from Sea Grant, in order to support our work to try to understand how much is coming in, where does it go, and what's the impact. And so at the same time that we were doing this,
So meanwhile, down the street at the University of Rochester, our colleagues in biomedical engineering had invented these really cool silicon nanomembranes, which enable them to measure really small particles. And remember what I said before, that's one of the big challenges in microplastics research, is being able to do that. So we had this really cool technical development that was happening at U of R while this research was going on at RIT, but they needed to see if it worked. So one of the first things they asked is, could we get samples from the water supply to find out if there were microplastics in our water. So we partnered with the City of Rochester's Water Division, and they were super generous and let us come to their plant and take samples at Hemlock Lake, and then all the way down through the reservoirs and pipes, ending in Gergen Hall on the U of R campus. And they wrote a paper together. You can see that people in the City Water Bureau and engineers and biologists are all part of this paper. Next slide, please. And basically, the TLDR is the water in Hemlock was found to be very, very clean, and by the time it got down to Gergen Hall, not so much. There was lots of gunk in it, including lots of plastics. But that kicked off, next slide, please, the realization that we had some interesting things going on here, both the developing the ability to measure these things, understanding of what they're doing in the environment, and then researchers in my department, in the medical center, thinking about, we have tools to study what these little particles do to the human body. Next slide, please. So Christy and I put those ideas together and applied for our federal grant. We got about $7.5 million from NSF and NIH to start the Lake Ontario Center for Microplastics and Human Health. And we started this about 2 years ago, and we want to give you a very high-level overview of what we're trying to do and how much progress we've made.
Okay, so LOMP is what we call our center, and the goal is really to prevent the negative impacts of microplastics on the lakes and on people, with the hypothesis that microplastics have a negative impact on both. Next slide. This is the overall structure of our center, where there's an administrative core that provides oversight and support. We have a community engagement core because the outreach to the community and engaging people in what we're doing is fairly important to us. We have a materials and metrology core. We're going to go into some of that in a minute. And then 3 separate research projects, 1 at RIT and then 2 at the U of R. Next slide. So this is our materials and metrology core. It's collaborative between the U of R and RIT. Next slide. And really, this is dealing with the issue that plastics are hard to measure, especially as you get smaller and smaller and smaller. So aligning methods and creating protocols and facilitating access to the instrumentation that we need in order to do this is really important. Next slide. And then so project 1, which is the one at RIT that I lead with Dr. Hoffman, we're looking at input, fate, and interactions in the lake. Next slide. with three aims. One is to get a better sense of the long-term input of plastic and then how that's showing up in the lake, particularly with changes in things like temperature and precipitation and storm patterns. The second is to understand how plastic transforms in the environment under different environmental conditions, different conditions of temperature and pH that may be happening in the future. And then the third is to combine all of that in order to create input and transport models that will predict where we may be at the greatest risk, and particularly where human health risk is the greatest.
And I'm going to try to wrap up really quickly because I know we really like to hear what your questions are, and we had a little bit of a slow start. So the two projects at the U of R, one of which is looking at what happens when you expose cells to microplastics of different sorts that you might find in the environment. How does that affect their viability and their function over time? Next slide, please. And also looking at the relationship between real particles in the lake and the air. To think about, remember I mentioned before that we're also concerned about being exposed to microplastics by breathing them in. Next slide, please. The other project we call Project 3. Jacques Robert has a colony of African frogs, and I've provided a little infographic because you might wonder, why are we using frogs to study microplastics? Turns out that they're really great experimental systems. We can expose the tadpoles to microplastics and watch what happens to their immune systems as they develop, as they grow up, how long it takes them to metamorphose, this sort of thing. Next slide, please. So he also is undertaking a wide range of experiments to look at where these plastics end up in the tadpoles' bodies, what kinds of effects we might expect from that, and then doing tests over time. Because tadpoles actually and frogs are very similar in their development to human bodies. So not so popular to feed microplastics to people and study them. Frogs are a great system for learning. So the next slide is a highlight of this infographic that we developed to say that we're really trying to share this research that we're doing at both RIT and U of R with the public in real time. So for example, we developed this infographic that you have handed out. Next slide, please. We're also investing heavily in community outreach and engagement. So there's community science, it's part of Project 1 that Christy mentioned, but also developing materials, some things like the brochure that I also handed out to you, very high level, and working with communities to understand what their questions are and how we can answer them in real time. Next slide, please. We also have what we call a LOMPER, which is basically our advisory board, and you'll see that there are people from the county, from the city, from state agencies that are advising us in real time because they're having to make decisions and respond to publics that are concerned about microplastics at the same time that we're studying them. So we're really trying to foster dialogue so that our research is informed by the questions they have and that they can be informed in solutions as quickly as possible. Next slide. I also wanted to give you the heads up. Part of the reason we thought this would be of interest is we are on a Great Lake, and the Great Lakes Commission has adopted a resolution last Halloween that there shall be a action plan process to figure out how to monitor and do research on microplastics in the lake because there are so many concerns about where they're going, how they're getting into us, and what they might be doing. So that's something that as a lakefront community, I think we all should be aware of and we'll be hearing a lot more about in the future. Next slide, please. So we're going to continue doing this research. We've got another 2.5 years. And meanwhile, contributing to this national and global effort to understand how microplastics are affecting the environment and human health. Critical part of that is methods development. And that's why we're really interested in partnering with public agencies like water authorities to get real world samples so that we can do our research and help understand what real world exposure to these microplastics is really like. So we're hoping, humble goals that Rochester is going to turn out to be a national, if not global, hub for studying microplastics and getting answers to these questions, and hoping that in real time we can be working with policymakers at the local and state level to move solutions forward. So next slide, please. You've gotten some handouts and we're pretty easy to find if you want to follow that up. And we have, I hope, a few minutes for questions from you.
Great, thank you. Legislator? Please just go ahead and talk to them.
A lot. Those of us that are following this, and I can follow it. I can't say overly passionately, but passionately, as you know. We keep hearing that a credit card for plastic is in our bodies right now, things like that. And we're hearing that in some preliminary research, they seem to be endocrine blockers. But when I listened to the Zoom call that you guys did on this earlier, couple months ago maybe, it seemed that the research isn't clear. What kind of effects are we seeing that these plastics have in research and in other research studies that are out there on the human body?
I'd like to use a quick example from the research that's being done with tadpoles shows that they do accumulate, like they show up throughout the tadpoles' bodies. They accumulate, they stay there for a long time, and then when those tadpoles grow up, their immune systems are compromised. So they know that they are having an effect on the development of their systems at a cellular level. It is difficult to answer the question about additives because, as we said, you don't know what you are exposed to and what additives may be in those plastics. So we have to sort of do that systematically, one plastic at a time, and just get a sense of the range of kinds of effects they can have. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think that the thing to add to that is when you're thinking about a microplastic, there's the particle and then there's all the chemicals associated with the particle. And so the endocrine disruptor piece of it, where those ideas are coming from is the chemicals embedded in the plastics. And then there's the particle itself. And so it's a really difficult problem to separate those, and takes kind of good experimental design to get at those ideas. So some of the chemicals that are in plastic have already been pretty well studied, but how they get from the plastic to your body and then have an effect are the parts that we really don't understand very well.
Through the chair, is your grant secure? The grant that you're receiving?
We hope so. We have funding for our third year, and we had to make some changes to match more of the administration's updated priorities. But for now, like fingers crossed, we're okay.
Through the chair, are you finding that the funders, the federal government, they understand that this could be a problem that needs to be investigated?
Yes, I mean, we've managed to keep our funding. And I think that, originally our center was also focused a lot on climate change. And so those pieces have been reduced, but the plastic part of it has not. And I think both NSF and NIH recognize the global crisis level of the problem.
So you have partners?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, our program officers are wonderful.
We do this? Sorry. So I got a question. As you do the research for this, is it more of a regulatory issue or that you're leaning toward, or more of a consumer choice?
Leaning towards. So we're trying to inform solutions, all sorts. And this is not something that people can make individual choices about. If there's microplastics in the air and the water, you can't avoid them. So trying to figure out how to measure them in the environment, measure what's getting into our bodies, and then figure out what we can do about them is, eventually where this is pointing to.
Thank you. Just one other question. So what's the most effective ways to reduce our exposure if we really have no idea where it's coming?
We get asked that a lot. And there are lots and lots of different ways that we're exposed to it all the time, right? It's our clothing, it's in the air, it's in our food. Our food is always packaged in plastic. It's really frustrating to go to the grocery store. But some of the most simple things are don't microwave in plastic. The heat breaks it down and it's going to get into your food. If your containers are falling apart and you keep our old Tupperwares around forever, maybe don't do that. You can make sure that your dryer is well vented. And if you really want to avoid it, avoid synthetic fabrics. Fibers are one of the most common types of microplastic that we find in the environment. In our samples, like the data that I showed from the nearshore region of the lake, fibers are by far the dominant material. And that's coming from textiles mostly. So those are some of the simple things, but as Katrina said, it's really hard because as you try to make really conscious decisions as a consumer and as a resident, it's everywhere you are, and it's hard to avoid it.
So Christy's group is doing a great job of helping us understand what plastics are getting into the environment and where. we have much less good understanding of where the plastics, how they're getting into our bodies and what they're doing. And that's why the question, we can tell you personal things that will reduce the plastics going into the environment, but how you could reduce the effects on your own health is much harder. And that's why we really want to partner with government agencies, other partners to understand what is in our water, what is in our air, what is in our food supply. And it's really going to take a partnership to do that. I think you had a question too.
And would it make a difference with the type of plastic or the chemical makeup of that plastic?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Our scientists are going to be really busy for a long time. And that's why we're so excited to be working together across different disciplines, because we can't approach this problem like we have with other chemicals in the past that are, one type, and one discipline can sort of follow a course. You really have to work together to try to figure out what are the most important questions to be asking and answering them in real time. And that's part of why we're so excited to have people from the county and the city and the state advising us in real time on our research.
You mentioned that they stay in the tadpoles for a long time. Do you know anything about the processes of plastic eventually being removed? How it works through the system? What parts of the body system it nothing? Just like, do you see it go down? You said that, so do you see it go down over time?
One of the cool things about working with the tadpoles is they can measure what they put into the water, what comes out. You should come and have a lab tour sometime. It's very cool. But they get a sense of a lot of, like you said, you have a credit card's worth of plastic in your body. That's how much we consume. We don't know how much is in our bodies, because a lot of it, is what happens if your dog eats a credit card, right? You probably see it the next day. But what they're showing is that they do accumulate in the liver and then throughout the tissues. And the smallest particles, I think you saw some of the slides with lit up red dots. It's dying particles so that they can see where they end up in the tadpoles' bodies, and they actually see them getting into cells. And once a plastic particle is inside a cell, it can't get out again. We don't have a system for doing that. So you sort of picture this pyramid or this triangle of where they end up. And and so many of them do go through the human body and leave, but once they get into the cells, there really isn't a system for getting them out again.
Do the microplastics trigger an immune response?
So let's see, a direct immune response. Let's talk about that. We know that they are resetting the tadpoles' immune system so that they are not as able to respond to viruses in the future. And now they're going through a line of research to see what implications that might have for cancer.
And that hypothetically is because the microplastics that are going into the cell are negatively affecting the cell environment, potentially even the DNA within inside of it because of the chemicals that are leaching out, hypothetically.
Yeah, that's trying to figure out the mechanism by which it's working. And that's why the Project 2 is exposing cells to them to try to look at the AH receptors and whether they are lit up by and affected by the microplastics.
And to date, is there any correlation between microplastics and any type of known diseases that we have right now?
There are lots of correlations, and we don't know much about mechanisms.
Could you name a few?
No.
No, I mean, like, which correlations are there?
So I think at the global level, people are concerned about, looking at correlations between endocrine disrupting chemicals and the amount of plastics that we're seeing in the environment, and fertility and cancer and developmental disorders. But it's impossible to pick apart which of them are due to what. And as Christy said, what is the root of those endocrine disrupting chemicals into our bodies? We really don't know what role microplastics play in that.
Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair professors. I think about 6 years ago, the state voted to ban the microplastics, things like shampoo, toothpaste, all those things, and they were going to be phased out. The reason why it worked is because California, Texas, and Florida did the same thing. So the big companies, Colgate, Palmolive, and all that would phase it out. And I was just wondering where that legislation is now.
So I believe it was 2018 that it was actually banned at the federal level. Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Korfbacher, Dr. Tyler.
So much for
Yeah,
your
thanks for
interest,
having
and
us.
we handed these out because we're very easy to find. We're happy to interact with you or your constituents, and hopefully we'll be around for many years to do so. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay. The next item on the agenda is new business. Madam Clerk.
Approval of minutes first.
Oh, didn't I do that? Okay, the next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. I think I did that. You have the January 27th, 2026 minutes in the Environment and Public Works Committee before you. They will stand approved unless the clerk is notified of any changes by the end of the day. Next item on the agenda is new business, Madam Clerk.
Referral 2026-0036, amend the 2026-2031 capital improvement program and the 2026 capital budget to add a project entitled Airport Property Acquisition at the Frederick Douglass Greater Rochester International Airport. Authorize financing for the project.
Second.
Moved by legislator Hoffman, seconded by legislator Mafucci. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 26-0037, authorize a contract with CNS Engineers, Inc. for design services for the airport parking garage expansion study project at the Frederick Douglass Greater Rochester International Airport.
Second.
Moved by legislator DeVecchio Hoffman, seconded by legislator Mafucci. Are there any questions? Legislator Jeffrey.
Thank you. Through the chair to the administration. How was it decided that increased car rental capacity was needed? If there is a report, could it be provided to us, please?
Through the chair, I'm Allison Leah with the airport. The car rental companies approached us requesting additional covered parking for their vehicles. It's a priority parking space for everybody. So doing this study will help determine a good location, cost estimate of what this might entail exactly. Car rentals then potentially have their own designated garage space, which frees up additional space in the current existing garage. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Thank you.
As a follow-up to that, are you considering any alternatives, or are the rental car companies considering any alternatives, like bringing in cars from some other location that they have as needed?
They currently have surface lots uncovered. This study will kind of help determine different alternatives that we can do.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 26-0038, authorize a contract with CHA Consulting, Inc. for design services for the runway 1028 rehabilitation project at the Frederick Douglass Greater Rochester International Airport.
Second.
Moved by legislator DeVecchio Hoffman, seconded by legislator Mafucci. Is there any discussion?
Thank
Legislator
you, Madam
Morris.
Chair. Through you to the administration. So this referral that we're considering is just for the contract for the design services. Do you have a estimate timeframe on the project itself? When that would take place?
Through the chair, yeah, this would just be a design this year, construction, so we're in 26, probably in 2028. But which would also be these are both would be federally funded through the FAA.
And again, Madam Chair, through you to the administration, do you have at this point a rough estimate on what the actual rehabilitation project will cost?
I do not. If you need that information, I can get it to you.
I'm sure this will be part of what Cloth Harbor does to help arrive at that. Just was curious if there was an estimate at this point. And then again, Madam Chair, through you to the administration, when the project takes place, Do you know now what if there will be, or what impacts it might have on travel, air travel?
Through the chair, yeah, because we have two runways, it really should not impact travelers at all.
Thank you very much. Are you?
Yeah, following up, Legislator Morris, how long does the rehabilitation project take typically?
The design is about a year-ish. Construction will be over the construction season.
Great, thank you. And do I understand this is rehabilitation, so there's no expansion of this runway?
Correct, zero expansion.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 26-0039, authorize a contract with McFarland Johnson, Inc. for design services for the rehabilitative access roadway system project at the Frederick Douglass Greater Rochester International Airport.
Moved by Legislator Muffucci, seconded by Dr. Jeffrey, Legislator Jeffrey. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 26-0047, authorize a contract with Keeler Construction Company, Inc. for construction services for the Bowen Hill Road culvert replacement over Arundequoit Creek tributary project in the town of Mendon.
Second.
Sorry. Moved by Legislator Becky-Hoffman, seconded by Legislator Muffucci. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 26-0054, authorize intermunicipal agreements with the Monroe County Public School Districts and Board of Cooperative Services for a food waste diversion grant pilot program.
Moved by Legislator Hoffman, seconded by Legislator Muffucci. Is there any discussion? Legislator Sinclair.
Through the chair. How successful has the program been at the participating schools?
Through the chair, I would say the program has been very successful for the five school districts that were awarded grants, namely Brighton, Fairport, Penfield, Pittsford, and West Arundequoit. To date, or I should say from September through December, we've diverted 85,000 tons of food waste at 4 of the school districts. Pittsford's program is going to really kick off in their spring semester.
Thank you. And through the chair, is the city of Rochester School District eligible?
Through the chair, yes, they are.
And through the chair, are they participating?
Through the chair, currently, no.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Great, thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 26-0055, amend the 2026-2031 capital improvement program, the 2026 capital budget, and bond resolution 376 of 2024 to expand the scope of and increase funding for the project entitled Roof Improvements, and authorize a contract with Popley Architecture and Engineering and LSDPC for professional design services for the project.
Second.
Moved by Legislator Hoffman, second by Legislator Muffucci. Is there any discussion? Yes, Legislator Muffucci.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Through you to the administration, any consideration for solar panels on the roof?
Through the chair, we consider solar panels on an independent basis for use around the county, but not necessarily as it relates to a roof project. So as it relates to this specific project, no, there's no intention to include solar panels.
Thank
We
you.
will look at them and we'll design the roof so it's the most energy efficient roof that we can obtain.
Thank you.
Just to follow up, the new roof design would be capable of supporting solar if we decide to move forward with that?
Through the chair, yes.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 26-0056, authorize a contract with McFarland Johnson, Inc. for design services for the rehabilitative access roadway system project at the Frederick Douglass Greater Rochester International Airport.
Moved by legislator Hoffman, seconded by legislator Mafucci. Is there any discussion? So just to clarify again, this is just a rehabilitation, no expansion to the administration?
Through the chair, correct, just rehabilitation.
Right, thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Okay, for the next two items, I move pursuant to Public Officers Law, Section 105(1)(h), to enter executive discussion for the consideration of this item and the following one, because publicity of this proposed acquisition would substantially affect the value of the property being discussed. Okay, seconded by Dr. Jeffries. All in favor? We have to vote on the motion to go into executive session. Any opposed? No, okay. So then we have to clear the gallery, including of administration members. Okay, so the Environment and Public Works Committee meeting shall continue. Clerk, please read our next item on the agenda.
We have to vote on this item first.
We have to vote on which item.
Yes, we have to vote on the item we just went into executive committee on. So I will read the item again,
Yes,
and we can vote.
yes,
All right.
agreed.
Once I find my agenda. Referral 26-0058, classification of action and determination of significance pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act to amend the 2026-2031 capital improvement program and the 2026 capital budget to add a project entitled Purchase and Renovation of the former Carestream building and authorize the acquisition and renovation of the property located at 150 Verona Street in the city of Rochester.
Moved by legislator DeVecchio Hoffman, seconded by legislator Mafucci. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Next item.
Referral 26-0059, amend the 2026-2031 capital improvement program and the 2026 capital budget to add a project entitled Purchase and Renovation of the former Carestream building. Authorize financing for the project, authorize the acquisition and renovation of the property located at 150 Verona Street in the city of Rochester.
Moved by legislator DeVecchio Hoffman, seconded by legislator Mafucci. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item carries. Are there any other matters to come before this committee? There being no other matters, the February 23rd, 2026 meeting of the Environment and Public Works Committee stands adjourned. The next meeting of the Environment and Public Works Committee will be held on Monday, March 23rd, 2026 at 5:15 p.m.